Hello, my name is Grace Lane, and this is my project on Satanism. I got the pleasure to interview registered Satanist Brooklyn Lee, who will be telling about his background, information, some misconception, and even politics. This interview was super informative, and I'm very excited to present to you our interview together. Thank you so much for listening.
First off, do I have your consent to record this conversation to post for Arizona State University?
Absolutely.
Okay. What is your history with Satanism and what makes you qualified to have this conversation?
I have been a registered Satanist for a few years now. Excuse me. You So technically, to become a registered Satanist, you just go to their website, the Church of Satan, and you can actually become a card-carrying official member. You fill out a form, you devote your life to it, yada yada yada. Once again, more of the theatrics. But I am officially, I've been for about 5 to 6 years now, an official registered member of the Church of Satan.
So start with your background. When and how did you find out about Satanism?
As far as background goes, I wasn't raised particularly religious. My family wasn't super involved with church or anything like that. I grew up with like certain family members that were more religious than others, but it was never enforced upon me strongly. Um, I've discovered Satanism honestly through a documentary. There was a documentary I watched one time. It was called Hail Satan with a question mark. And that kind of went through and showed you the aspects of what it was versus it being the way it's like, for lack of a better word, demonized. And through that, I like got an idea of what it was about and got more of an interest. And then I really deep dived into it more online and actually read about it. This is where I discovered what it was.
So, what drove you to be interested specifically in Satanism and why do you identify with it?
Mainly because I think there is some misconceptions about it overall as a belief, because it's not necessarily a religion. And I just didn't identify anywhere else as far as other religions go. And my specific set of beliefs is I don't believe in anything. That's the big misconception about Satanism, is there's not really a deity. Um, and I think that most people, when they hear it, because it has like that, it has essentially a trigger word in the name with intention, right? That's the entire point of the faith as it is created. And I identify with it in a sense of I like the idea of the movement that they were actually pushing.
Do you worship Satan?
No, not at all. As I stated earlier, that is a big misconception about Satanism. So there is different kinds of Satanism, like any faith. There's like multiple varieties and different belief systems that follow through with that. There is theistic Satanism, which is not a really well believed faith. I've never met anybody or come across anybody in my life that actually identifies with that. Theistic Satanism is the idea that you believe in the deity that is Satan as like an overall ruler. But as far as like Satanism goes, it's more of a philosophy. So the idea of Satanism is that you use satanic and demonic symbolism in order to combat the fissure between church and state. Because mainly the whole point of the whole idea is that if there is in town hall where they make local laws, they put up a statue of the Ten Commandments, which is not separating church and state. You're putting a religious monument in front of a government building. Then there should be no reason or no hoopla about why we can't put up a statue of Baphomet, right? These are the things that they basically do, is that they're trying to combat the system in order to prove that there's no reason that these things can't intercross.
Is Satanism evil or demonic?
Visually, maybe, right? So no, in its essence and in its heart and soul, if you will, it is not. There is no essence of it or or any evil intent behind it. Visually, like I said, that is kind of the goal, is you use these jarring images to the average person in order to evoke a response, right? No movement ever happened by like wearing nothing but gray, right? It's not dormant. You have to kind of make a stance. And by wearing these symbols and promoting these things and going through, honestly, the theatrics of it, That's kind of the reason that it gets an eye. Because if you just went out there and protested against it, nobody would care. But if you go out there with, devil horns on and fake blood and, acting a fool, then people will look.
All right. How does Satanism and politics intersect?
Well, the story I told you earlier was an example, more or less. That was the statue of Baphomet going up next to the Ten Commandments statue. It's actually a true story. There was a real thing that happened, that a state government decided that they would erect a giant Ten Commandments statue in front of their local town hall. And Satanists showed up, put up a big statue of Baphomet, and people lost their minds. It became a whole international scandal. People were putting it all over the place. And it was nothing to do with the idea of the devil or anything like that. It was mostly just to prove that it was a biased opinion, right? The idea of doing that was to be like, look, we're a Christian state, and you can't necessarily be that. You have to be unbiased. Also, the Church of Satan is big, and they protest a lot. They're big in rallies. They fight for BLM. They fight for women's rights. They fight for LGBTQ plus rights. They are big in the community and accepting everybody and loving everybody. For instance, Roe v. Wade was recently overturned. And if you are a registered Satanist, technically you can still get an abortion because it is a part of your religious rights. So Satanism is constantly trying to keep minority communities uplifted and in the conversation when other people are not allowing that to happen.
What are some other misconceptions that maybe people have about Satanism?
I think, so there's, the biggest misconceptions come that if you look into it, like if you bare minimum look into it at face value, you're going to come across a man named Anton LaVey. And Anton LaVey is essentially the founder of what is modern day Satanism. We found the Church of Satan. Anton LaVey wasn't necessarily a bad guy. He was kind of a weirdo. He was a guy who just saw the way religion was done and decided he didn't have anything to do with it. And he decided to create his own faith, and he really leaned into the theatrics. That was his big thing. So if you look at any pictures of him, he's dressed as a devil, he's carrying snakes, he's got women laying on pentagrams. He's like committing to the whole thing. But even if you read any of the books he did write about it, none of the books he wrote necessarily promote it. Like in the form of Satanism, the most important holiday is your birthday, right? It's supposed to be a religion that celebrates you as a person and your identity, because as far as faith goes, the most important thing to you is going to be you. Whether you love others or not, you have to take care of yourself, It's kind of the human condition at the end of the day. I mean, that's kind of the idea that he was promoting. He just also wrote a bunch of random books that seemed like he was talking about rituals, but once again, it was just for the theatrics of it. So I think the biggest misconception I have is that besides the idea that there's some sort of demonic worship, is that there is no practice. There's no practice to Satanism. The only practice is to like everybody, be nice to everybody, care about yourself, and don't harm anybody, especially from an upper power, right? So that'd probably be the biggest misconception I think people take away, is that they think there has to be some sort of theatric to it, and to be an individual person, there does not.
Do you want people to know who are afraid of Satanists?
Don't be. There's nothing to be scared of. It's just people. It's just people who think that there is no place for faiths to make decisions for people. There's no reason that a faith should have a determination on how laws are made, because there is thousands and thousands of faiths. Just in Christianity, there's over 2,000 different branches of Christianity alone. So there's no one way you can be right about making any decisions.
Do you consider Satanism a religion?
It is not. It is not. It is recognized as one. Took a while. It is recognized officially as one. But at its core, so like to define religion is to have a faith that essentially worships something and has practices and traditions amongst those lines. Satanism doesn't necessarily have that. There is no, like I said, there's no deity, there's no holidays, there's no traditions. At its core, none of those things necessarily exist. It is technically recognized as one, but I would say if you really looked at it at its full face value, I would more or less align it with a philosophy.
Is there anything else you would like us to know?
I would say just look into it. Don't be afraid. You're not going to be harmed or put on a list, or anybody's going to come after you if you just decide to like reach out and look into it. Because if you have ever considered yourself, let's just say atheist, or even agnostic for the matter, it doesn't harm to look out, because there's no saying that you can't still be in yourself a spiritual person and believe there's more to this, and also think that Satanism has some good ideas, instead of just immediately thinking that it's something harmful.
Thank you for taking your time out of your day to talk about Satanism with me. I'm excited to see how the project turns out, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
I hope it goes great. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. Hail Satan.